My name is Ian Holmes, and with me is my colleague Emma Diffley. We're both part of the Geoservices support team here at EDINA, and we're going to go through the aerial Digimap collection, which was launched in October last year. There's two parts to this webinar. First of all, we're going to talk about some of the potential uses for the aerial photography data, and in the second part, we're going to do a demonstration of the live services, so the aerial roam and aerial download services. Okay, after this webinar, you will get an email which should come out tomorrow lunchtime, which will have a recording of this webinar. So we're recording it and we'll put that on YouTube and send you a link to that, along with a transcript of any questions that are asked during the webinar, some links to the information about the services, and a link to a feedback form as well, which would be grateful if you could complete. So if you have any connection problems during this webinar, don't worry, it is being recorded and you will get a link to this tomorrow. So you can always go back through it again if you didn't catch something or if there's something that didn't make sense. Okay, before we set off, it's really useful for us to know who we've got attending this webinar. So we're going to run a little poll just to find out the current status of everybody at your institution. So I'll launch this poll quickly. Okay, we'll stop it now. So we'll quickly just share the results just so everybody can see what we've got. The majority of people are postgraduates. We've got a number of undergraduate students and around 30% staff. So that's great. Good to know. Thanks very much for completing that, guys. Okay. Control. Okay, so a little bit of background about the service. So this is a new venture between EDINA, the University of Edinburgh, and Get Mapping, and we are now supplying aerial photography, which is the 25 centimeter resolution aerial photography. There's lots of different types of aerial photography out there. We're taking the vertical aerial photography, and we've got the 25 centimeter version because this is the most detailed data that is available nationally. So across the whole country, it is available at 25 centimeter resolution. We're getting it from Get Mapping, the data supplier for this, and you'll see there's around 250,000 1 kilometer tiles. So the data is supplied as 1 kilometer tiles in JPEG format, and it's around just under 2 terabytes in totals. As part of the service, as part of the agreement with Get Mapping, we'll be getting annual updates to the data, and the first one of these is due fairly soon. We're just waiting for confirmation for Get Mapping as to a delivery date for this, but hopefully we'll get this very soon. Now, obviously, it's not possible to capture data for the whole country at the same time, so there is some variation in the range of dates that the data is available for. And this map shows, it's sort of generalized into a few bands, but it shows that the majority of data has been captured in the last 8 years, and a large proportion of that has been captured in the last year, so since 2011. There's a very small amount of data that's captured 2004 and earlier, and hopefully when we start to get the updates from Get Mapping, some of these older areas will drop off and be replaced by newer data. Okay, so as well as being a really interesting resource, the aerial photography also has lots of different practical uses, and we're going to go through some of these now across different disciplines just to give you a bit of background as to how you can use this data and how it might be of use to your research. So the first one we're going to look at is archaeology. Aerial photography is a key resource in archaeology nowadays, and it allows individuals to get a better understanding of certain archaeological sites. It's actually one of the most important ways of identifying new sites because users can identify features through the aerial imagery that are not often visible on the ground. So things like shadow markings, different ground characteristics, things like that. So what we'll do is we're just going to jump out of PowerPoint and go into aerial roam. So this is the aerial roam interface. Don't worry too much about it for the moment if you're not familiar with it. We'll come back and give you a proper demonstration in a few minutes. So this is an area of Northumberland. This is actually Hadrian's Wall. You can kind of see the line of Hadrian's Wall where my mouse is across here, stretching off to the east. And in the middle here is a fort. So this is a fort called Bird Oswald. If I zoom in a little bit more, to hopefully become a bit clearer, you can see the line of the old wall going across here, some of the earthworks that are visible. If we zoom in as well, you can see some of the sentry posts built along the wall as it comes into focus there, and some of the earthworks down there as well. We'll just pan back across to this fort. Now, like I say, this was a Roman fort along Hadrian's Wall. You can see quite clearly the outer wall. I can zoom in a little bit further. You can see some of the existing excavations here and some of the other features of it. You can also see some interesting line work down the bottom left-hand corner here, the southwest corner of the inner area of the fort. Now, if we switch over to, I'm going to go to Ordnance Survey Rome now. So this is the mapping data for the exact same fort here. So it says Bird Oswald Roman Fort on it, and you can see the walls around it, some of the earthworks and the ditches that were part of the Hadrian's Wall feature. And again, if we zoom in, you can see there's a well marked here, but interestingly, there's nothing marked in the southwest corner of this fort here that's visible on the aerial photography. So this is just to show you that this is a useful way of identifying features that might not exist on mapping that could be worthy of investigation. So for archaeology, you might want to go out and prioritize this site to try and find out what these markings are. I'm not saying it's a significant archaeological site, but it's just to show you that you can see things that aren't always mapped on the current detailed mapping from Ordnance Survey. Okay, if we look at another use, so in terms of land use, aerial photography can be used to examine larger areas, which mean that the site visits can be more focused on specific locations. And there's a bunch of tools in Rome that you can use for measuring things as well. So again, I'm going to go back just to our aerial Rome application. And in this case, I'm going to zoom over to a place called Elterwater, which is a small village in the Lake District, just inside the Lake District, sort of southern end of the Lake District. And here's our photography. If I just zoom in a little bit so it's a little bit clearer. Elterwater, the village, is here, towards the right-hand side of my map window. But you'll see over to the west, the area is dominated by a medium-sized quarry feature that's been recently excavated, and it's still alive to this day, still active. And there's also this spoil heap to the west of that as well. So this is just to show you that using the sort of standard measurement tools that exist in all the Rome applications, you can measure the areas of features. So here I'm just going to measure the approximate excavated area of this quarry. So that comes at around 33,000 square meters, which is approximately 3.3 hectares. And that's just a rough measurement. My measurement's not been that accurate there, but it's just to show you that using the features in Rome, you could measure the areas of different types of land cover. So be it forestry, agricultural land, urban areas, or in this case a quarry, which could be useful for ecological or environmental or land use studies. Another area that aerial photography is useful for is in the urban environment, where aerial photography can be really important to understanding the existing infrastructure and the land use. And it's also possible through 3D modeling that the impact of proposed developments can be assessed on the environment. And much like urban planning, in the architectural area, with architectural studies, it's possible to combine multiple data sets taken from Digimap and use these to create really realistic 3D models so that you can assess the impact of changes to existing architecture. So there's a couple of data sets listed there that you could combine with the aerial photography to create some 3D models. And again, the best way of displaying this and showing this is to actually demonstrate some that have been created. So just going to flip to a web browser here. So hopefully you can see this. This is a 3D model of an area of South London. It's actually Battersea Park, so just south of the River Thames. So the River Thames is the sort of murky brown feature across the top here. Now it is interactive, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and hopefully you'll all be able to see this on your screens. Hopefully it won't make anybody too seasick. So this is Battersea Park in the middle here. Anyone familiar with the area? This is Battersea Power Station at the back here with its 4 famous towers. And just to explain what we've got, so the base of this data, the actual surface that all this information is sitting on, is taken from a product called OS Terrain 5. So it's a digital terrain model, a raster product that gives us a 5-meter surface, grid surface of the area. So it's really detailed. It's the most detailed digital terrain model that's available for the country. On top of that, we've got our aerial photography, so you can see that we've got a nice realistic ground cover for the park here, and in between the buildings that you can see as well. So that's the aerial photography that's been draped on top of that. Now on top of that, we've got a number of other data sets. So the most prominent one here is probably the buildings, which you can see extruded in 3 dimensions. This is taken from the OS Mastermap building height attribute data set, and is provided in 3D through Digimap. So that's draped on top, along with all these road centre lines and junctions. So this is the Ordnance Survey Open Roads product. It's a network data set that shows the centre lines of roads and all the junctions, which are drawn here with these little these little red spheres. On top of this, we also have some contours. That's the orange lines that you can see running along the banks of the Thames there. It's quite a flat area, so there's not too many of these. And finally, on top of those, we've extruded some trees. So these are individual point features that are taken from the master map topography layer. So they're positioned coniferous and non-coniferous trees. So that's why we've got the non-coniferous cones that you can see there, and the coniferous trees are just drawn as effectively spheres on top of a cylinder. So again, by creating this, I did this entirely from data derived from Digimap, downloaded from Digimap. I didn't do any processing to it. It was just downloaded straight from Digimap and rendered through a GIS package called QGIS, and used a plugin to create this 3D model. So there was no processing required. It's all available as it is at the moment. And you can see it'd be really useful if you're doing a study to assess the impact of a change in an environment to create a model like this and see how it would affect the visual appearance of an area. So that was done in QGIS, but we're not tied to particular vendors here. There's a screen grab of it and a list of the data sets available that we're using it. Here is an example of another 3D model. You can do this 3D modeling in most GIS and CAD packages these days. It's been a real growth area in the last sort of 12, 24 months. This one was done in InfraWorks, which is an Autodesk product, and it's actually Elterwater. It's the area we looked at a few minutes ago when we measured the quarry. So this is the village of Elterwater down here, and this is the quarry that we measured the surface area of, which came in at 3.3 hectares. Now, when we were looking in 2 dimensions down through aerial roam measuring this quarry, you didn't really get any sense of the depth of the quarry or the magnitude of quarrying that had gone on here. But now, by viewing this in 3 dimensions, you can see that quite a lot of material has been taken out. It's actually quite a deep quarry, and the spoil heap that's been built up from that quarrying activity is actually quite substantial. So again, it's just to demonstrate the use of this data and how you can analyze the information in 3 dimensions to get more value from it. So that's one from InfraWorks, a CAD package. And our final screen grab here is from another GIS package called ArcGIS Pro. And this is of an area of Edinburgh. It's Arthur Seat in Edinburgh, and again we've got the buildings and features in front. We've also got some mapping data underneath. The aerial photography here is actually semi-transparent, so you can see through it and see some of the mapping data underneath, which is why you can see some of the names of the areas and the towns and the roads visible through that actual data. Okay, so that's just a few examples of what this data can be used for. Just before we start the second part, which is a demonstration of the aerial roam and aerial download services, we're just going to run a quick poll, because again, it would be really useful for us to know if the people attending are from an institution that currently subscribes, or if you're not currently subscribed to Aerial Digimap. So again, if you could just answer that poll very quickly, we'll just run it for a few more seconds to get as many answers as we can. Again, it's just really helpful for us to know the audience that we've got attending this webinar today. Sorry for the brief pause there. Right, we'll close that poll now. So just to share the results, basically it's 50-50, more or less, attendees. So that's great. Thanks very much for completing that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to actually look at the 2 applications, so aerial roam and aerial download. And again, rather than go through PowerPoint slides, we're going to just jump into the service. So let's clear some of these. Okay, so we're going to go back to our aerial roam and we'll zoom out as if we've just come into the service for the first time. So here we have our aerial roam application. The interface should be very familiar to all our existing Digimap users. We use the exact same framework for all our roam clients. So the toolbars, the menus, the panels on the left-hand side, the map window in the middle, it should all look very familiar and should be easy to use for anyone that's used any of our services previously. Now, the first top 3 zoom levels here all show OS Open data. They're not displaying aerial photography at this level. If we zoom in a bit, the data gets a little bit more detailed, and you'll see in the slider on the right hand side here, it does indicate whether it's displaying OS data or aerial imagery. Now, if we zoom in a little bit further, the aerial imagery will start to come in, and you can see the square edges at the top here shows that it's a tiled data set. It's all separate individual 1 kilometer tiles. Now I'm just going to zoom in on Edinburgh. Edinburgh Castle specifically, just to show the level of detail that we've got in the data. As we start to get further and further in, you can see more and more features appearing. It becomes more clearer. And if we go a bit further in, So here you can see how detailed this data is. It's 25 centimeters, which is really quite a small pixel size. So you can make out individual parking bays on the road down the south here, white lines down the middle of the road, and you can even make out individuals on the castle esplanade there in front of Edinburgh Castle. So it's quite a nice data set. It's very interesting to browse and look around. But there's also a bunch of functions that we're going to show you as well. So if I just zoom out a little bit and go over towards the train station. So here's Edinburgh Waverley, one of the main train stations here. Now we've got an opacity slider at the top here. There is backdrop mapping behind here, and if we adjust the opacity of the aerial imagery sitting on top of it, you can start to reveal the mapping data underneath. So again, this is using the same OS open data that we saw when we were zoomed all the way out, but users can adjust the opacity. So if you're not sure what features are, you can change the opacity and see the data that's underneath there. So we have an opacity slider, and this will come out in printed files as well. So if you create a map on screen that's got 50% opacity, that will come through into a print file that you create from the system as well. So you can choose what level of opacity you wish. We also have an overlay, which includes information on roads and place names. If I just enable that. So here you can see we've got Northbridge labelled quite clearly, Edinburgh Waverley. All the different features are labelled, and again this information translates through into any print files that you create from the system as well. Now we've had a couple of questions about the dates that the data has been taken. So if I zoom over to Stockport, I mentioned at the very start that obviously it's not possible to capture the whole country in one go. So obviously the data that we've got in the system is made up from multiple date and flight periods. Now this is Stockport over on the northwest of England. You can see, hopefully down the middle of your screen, there's actually quite a clear boundary here in terms of the different colours. We've got a darker green and a lighter green across this boundary. If I just zoom in a bit further, and you can see it extending all the way down. So what we've got here is data from two different flight times, and we can use our Get Feature Information tool, which is the little eye icon top right here of the window. If we click on the map, it will query the data that's underlying, that's beneath here, and it will give you information on when that particular tile was flown. So it's outlined it in red for us on the screen. It shows me where I've clicked, and it says that this particular tile was flown. This is date flown on the 11th of June 2015, so around 18 months ago. If we use the same tool and click on the tile to the right of that particular line, you'll see this one actually dates from the 2nd of June 2009, so that's quite a bit older. But the two tiles match up really well. If I zoom in, there's a car park right in the middle of here, and you can actually see that the two tiles match perfectly in terms of the white lines that make up and separate the parking bays and the road centre lines and the edge of the roads as well. So even though there's about a 6-year time difference between these two tiles, they actually line up perfectly between the two of them. Now, not everywhere is there such a stark line between two areas. So if we go to Greenwich down in London, you'll see in this particular area there are actually this feature here where there's a marked colour change between two areas. It's not in a straight line. It actually seems to follow natural features on the ground. And what you get here, if I use the information tool and click on a particular area, so here, this particular tile, you'll notice, has got two separate date flown information in here. So one from April 2013 and one from May 2014. If I click to the west of this tile, you'll see this area was captured in May 2014, and over to the east it was captured in April 2013. And the tile in the middle is actually a composite tile. So Get Mapping, our data provider, have merged data from two separate flight times into a single tile, and they've actually cropped them to natural features on the ground to make it more useful to the end user. And again, like I showed with the car park in Stockport, if I zoom all the way in on this, you can see that the actual line where they've matched follows these natural features. So it follows the edge of this road on the west hand side, goes around the roundabout, and then follows this road down the east hand side. And that's how, if you're looking at the system and you find that you've got two dates, that's what's happened. And the best way to find out what they are is to zoom out and use the same tool to find the tiles next to it, and you can work out what dates of which tiles refer to what in the tile that you're interested in. Okay, so that's the Get Feature Information tool. obviously we're in Rome, and I said before that we use the same framework for all of our Rome clients. So we have all the standard functionality that exists in all the other Rome clients available as well. So through the open and save menu, you can import and export your annotations, and you can save your maps and open your maps, any save maps that you've previously created. Using the map tools, we have our measurement tools that I already looked at, showing the when I measured the area of the quarry in Elterwater, but we've also got the full range of annotation tools, so you can do exactly the same annotations to the maps in Aerial Rome as you can in all the other Rome collections. Finally, the other one is printing. So I mentioned before that any opacity and overlay that you place on the maps, the road place name overlay, they'll come through into the print file if you've got them turned on. Just with our other Rome clients, you can also print the data from here, but there are a couple of restrictions. So we've limited the maximum paper size to A3, and we've limited the maximum print scale to 1 to 175,000. We've done this for performance reasons. If you print a map at A3 at the maximum print scale, so 1 to 175,000, it'll be opening up around 2,600 of the separate 1 kilometer images that are stored in the system. And obviously that takes quite a long time, and it then has to render that into a print file. So we've done this so that all print files are returned within a reasonable amount of time. If you need to print bigger areas, there's nothing stopping you downloading the data through aerial download and then doing that through a GIS or graphics package if you need a bigger print from the system. But for performance reasons, we're limited to A3 in this case. Okay, so that's really a tour of aerial Rome. What we'll do now is we'll take a quick look at aerial download. So I'm just going to go back to the main interface and go into aerial download. Again, as with Aerial Rome, we use the same download interface for all of our collections, so this will be very familiar to anybody. With all of our downloads, it's a three-step process. You choose your area, choose your data, add it to your basket, and order it. So if I just zoom into Manchester, we'll take some data for central Manchester. So I'm interested in Manchester city centre. So I've zoomed in. I'm just going to draw a rectangle around Manchester city centre. Select my data. We just have one product at the moment. And then I'm going to add it to my basket. I'll give it a name. And order my data. So that's really a simple way of ordering your data. Browse to your map, draw an area around, draw a rectangle around the area you want, and add it to your basket and order it. And behind the scenes, our system will go away and process that order, and I'll get an email link when that data is ready for me to download. I can go and get that data. Now, a couple of things that are of use in aerial download. We have an availability grid of the data, which is accessed through this right-hand menu. And if we turn this on, you'll see you now draw a little sort of set of pink boxes across the top, a grid across the top. It's got all the individual tile names. So these are the Ordnance Survey 1 kilometer tile names. And the date in brackets is the year that tile was last flown. So you'll see the data for Manchester, all of it on screen here looks like it was from 2015. So you can see that it's just a little visual indicator of when that data was available. When it was captured. The other thing to note is when I selected my area, if I just draw another rectangle, because the data is tiled, you will get all the data that overlaps your chosen area. So you will get the full tiles that you select here. And now in the select data panel, we have an allowance set here of 100 tiles. So you can see here it's showing me I'm going to get around 8 tiles. In this case, I'm actually going to get 12 because I've got my box actually covers 12 overlaps with 12 separate tiles. But this allowance of 100 tiles, we've set this so that users don't download too much data. Like I said at the very start, this is a very detailed data set, so 25 centimeter resolution, and you're ordering 1 kilometer tiles. There's a lot of pixels in each of these tiles, and each one is quite a few megabytes in size. So in terms of rough data volumes, 100 tiles, so that's 100 square kilometers, approximately 700 megabytes of data when it's zipped up and packaged and provided. So we've really just set that limit to stop people from downloading too much data that you then can't use because it's too big to download, or it's too big that your system can't cope with it. But if you need more data, again, there's nothing to stop you placing multiple orders. So what does 10 by 10 kilometers look like? We have an availability grid, which is our standard OS 10 km grid. If I just zoom out to show you, each one of these squares would be 100 kilometers. So if you needed to order all the data for Manchester, you're looking at around 6 separate orders, which isn't too time consuming to do. And you can actually use these tile names to download data. So in this little use tile name box, I can type in the SJ89 tile name, hit go, and it'll select that whole tile for me. So if you want to do separate adjacent orders for an area, you can just use the tile names on this grid, and you could order the 6 tiles that cover the area of Manchester there quite easily, and just place 6 separate orders. And as I mentioned right at the very start, at the moment we only have one set of data in the system, and that's why there's only one set of data showing up here. When you download the data, you will get the most recent that's available for that area. And when we start to get updates to the data from Get Mapping, we're going to look at ways to make previous versions of the data available for the same area where it exists. So over time, this area may change. There'll be an option to select older areas, older images if they exist for a particular area. Okay, so that's really a tour of aerial download in this case. If I go back to the slides, it's just a couple to finish off with, really. So I would imagine some people are wondering how they can get hold of Aerial Digimap, what the process is. So much with our other collections, this is a subscription service, so you need to subscribe to the service, or your institution needs to subscribe to the service. But in this case, the subscription's with EDINA, not JISC. This is not a JISC-funded service. The price range varies depending on your institutional higher education band, so the range of prices is shown there. These bands are published online if you need to check what your institution's band is. So any users that are attending this webinar, if you're interested in the service, please speak to your local Digimap site rep and register your interest with them. If you're not sure who your site rep is, there's a link there in the slide that take you to the site reps list. We publish this on our help pages. Any site reps that are listening to this webinar or members of staff, if you want to know the full process, there is a link there that will take you through to a help page that describes it. Basically, you need to complete a subscription form and agree to the specific sub-license for the data, send it back to us, and we'll activate your institution's access and send you an invoice at the same time. But if you have any questions about it, please do get in touch. Our email address is there at the bottom of this slide. We're going to stick around for a few minutes until whilst we answer questions. If people have got questions, please do send them through. Emma's been tapping away during this webinar, so there's been quite a few coming through. Thank you very much. I hope that was of use. We'd like to run just one more poll just before you go. We do run webinars throughout the year on various aspects of the service. If you have suggestions for webinars you'd like to attend, please do get in touch with us. But we'd also like to know what time of day suits you best for a webinar. So again, I'll just launch a quick poll. If you could indicate the time of day that would be best for you guys for attending a webinar, that would really help us in planning any future ones. And like I say, if you've got any suggestions for topics for webinar, please get in touch via the email address, which was edina@ed.ac.uk. Yeah, okay, so a couple of questions have come in that we'll just try and answer. So approximate file size of a single tile. So it does vary depending on the area, but they can be anything, well, up to around 7-8 megabytes for an individual tile. I said that 100 roughly comes out at around 700 megabytes. So that's suggesting sort of 7 megabytes per tile, but some of them are bigger. It just depends on the depth of color in an individual tile. And some of them are really small because they're just sort of blank areas, effectively, some of the C ones, for example. But yeah, so anywhere up to around 8 megabytes is an individual tile size. Yeah, so I did say at the very start, there are lots of different types of aerial imagery. We've got the vertical aerial imagery, and it is just red, green, blue values. So the question came in around different types, if it's infrared or RGB values. We just have the RGB data at the moment. If there's demand for other types of aerial imagery or post-processed aerial imagery, it is something that we could look at adding to the service. So again, if people have suggestions or think there'll be things that would be beneficial to the community, please do get in touch. And the best way is to email us at edina@ed.ac.uk, which should be on the screen there that you can see. But yeah, so at the moment, yeah, it's just the RGB values that are present in the data. There is no infrared information in there. Okay, so this goes back to a question about our mosaic tiles. So if I come out of here, it was referring to in an area where there are mosaic tiles, so it's got two separate flown dates, is there a way of telling how much has been used in each one? In short, there isn't, no. If I just zoom back to our Greenwich area, the only thing you could do is if you identify an area, so here we're looking at a composite tile that's got two separate dates. And using the tool, I know that the data on the west of this area, let's just bring this into the middle. So here's our composite tile. The data to the west was flown in 2014, and the data to the east was flown in 2013. But this tile in the middle is a composite. It's made up of two separate things. The only way, or the quick and easy way of working out the area is this is a 1 square kilometre tile. You could download it and you could measure the bits in a GIS package because you can see where the boundary flows around this particular tile. You could do it using the measurement tools in Aerial Roam itself, so depending how accurate you are, I'm zoomed quite far out in this particular case. But if I just click and drag around the area and double click to finish, so that's telling me that around what have we got there, 148,000 square meters were captured. So that's the 2014 data, and then the remainder of it would be from 2013. So that would be a quick and easy way of doing it, but it's not massively accurate because obviously I'm zoomed quite far out. If you wanted an accurate figure, the best thing to do would be to go into GIS and measure it through there, or zoom all the way in and do that process again through there. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so the question there was, yeah, so somebody's asked if they are terrain corrected using a DTM or true orthophotos using a DSM, a digital surface model. The honest answer is I don't know to that. We'll have to speak to our data supplier, Get Mapping, and find out from them. But like I said at the very start, we will follow up any questions that are unanswered. We'll follow them up following this webinar, and everybody will get a link to a transcript of all the Q&As that have been asked with all the answers as well. So we'll follow this up and make sure that you have the answer as soon as possible. But yeah, thank you for the question. That's a good one. The question was around do the files get provided with do the individual JPEG images get provided with JGW files, which are the world files that tell the system where in the world that the individual tiles sit next to each other. So yes, here I've opened my folder that I downloaded the data from. So this is the Manchester City Centre data. And in the actual folder with the data, you'll see every tile has got a JGW. So that's a world file that sits with each one. So here I've got in this folder, I think there's 32 items. So 16 of these are the actual images, and the other 16 are the world files that reference themselves so they can be placed in the right place in a computer system. And we have tested these files with all the major GIS and CAD systems out there, and they all work completely fine and will be placed in the right spatial locations, so you should see them correctly. But yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. Yeah, I think that's all the questions that we had that we wanted to discuss, but we will stay around for a few more minutes until no more questions come in. So please do ask anything that we've not covered, or if there's anything that's not clear. And if you have any other questions after the event, if you think of something later on, please do email it through and we'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as possible. But yeah, thank you very much for attending. I hope that's been useful. And yeah, like I say, if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.